Prakash worked as law clerk come research assistant to one of the judge of Supreme Court of India. He pursued his LLM from Indian Law Institute, New Delhi, and qualified UGC NET in 2011. He joined the bar in year 2012, and since then he is handling various matters before Supreme Court of India, High Court, and various tribunals in Indian, including NGT, NCDRC, NCLT, and CAT Principal Bench. He is actively engaged in academic activities, including various moot courts competition, guest lectures at different law schools in various capacity. He has drafted more than a dozen moot problems for various national and international level moot court competition, including Commonwealth Moot Court Competition. Professor N.R. Malviya is our guest. Also, I request all of you for the best view of our speaker's speech. Now, I request our founder, Mr. Zia Ansari, to please shed some light on our today's topic and welcome Advocate Ravi Prakash sir before we start the session.
Good afternoon, everybody. First of all, I request everybody to switch off their videos except Ravi sir due to some network issue so that we can have a voice quality. So except our speaker, I request everyone to, during while the speaker is speaking, you keep your videos closed. Welcome, everybody. Welcome, sir. It's been honored to have you here at Zia Judicial Legal Research Cell. Today, we people will be hearing from Ravi sir about uh, strict and absolute liability concept, but we know we understand as a tortious nature. But today, we are not focusing upon much on the tortious part. Rather, what are the constitutional perspective involved in this type of liabilities, and how this WISAC issue, which has been seen by different people in a different perspective. Some call it as a strict liability, some call it as absolute liability, even some call it as a fault liability. So I will throw light upon this issue and how such issues are to be dealt in future related to environment and everything. Over to you, sir. Uh, Please start the session. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, Jia. Good afternoon. Am I audible?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Good afternoon to all of you. I must admit that this is going to be my first of kind webinar through the online platform of Zoom. And I will be thankful to Jia for this opportunity. And as you all know and understand, the contemporary relevance of the present topic, that is understanding strict and absolute liability, the two principles which had been developed by the House of Lords and simultaneously the Supreme Court of India in context of environmental jurisprudence. What is their constitutional perspective? How significant these principles are from the contemporary constitutional principles and the contemporary constitutional debates when it comes to the right to life, right to environment, and a series of host of rights which I will be discussing and in my next 1 hour and then I will be reserving 15 minutes, say 15 minutes for the question answer session which I will be taking up. Now, I have divided this lecture in four parts. The first, I will be giving a brief outline of what are these two principles to refresh our memory, how it has been developed, how it has been dealt so far from the law of torts perspective, and how it has been incorporated in the Indian constitutional system by way of in the judgment of M.C. Mehta versus Union of India 1987. What were the incidents? What were the main reason to incorporate such principles, to develop such principle by the Supreme Court of India? Then in 2020, why we are discussing it, the importance and the relevance of the Vizag leak case, which has occurred on intervening night of 6th and 7th May 2020. Its constitutional significance in contemporary and modern human rights jurisprudence, particularly environmental rights, and the liability liability of the various authorities in the contemporary economic scenario, whether the private companies or the companies or the industry which runs these kinds of hazardous activities are alone liable, or the authorities which regulates, like environmental clearance authority, like the one which gives the pollution control certificate liability, such authorities are also liable in the contemporary jurisprudence? And if yes, then to what extent? What are the various provisions of the constitutions? What are the key developments since 1987, when the principle of absolute liability was developed by the Supreme Court of India? Since then, on the right to health, right to decent and human condition of worker, then right to nutrition, then what are the obligations of the various actors, non-actors, state actors in such a scenario? What are the contemporary laws, including the Disaster Management Act 2005, which contemplates a procedure, prescribed procedure, and which calls for a response in such a crisis or such a disaster scenario? Now, coming to the quick review of the principles. As we all know that the strict liability principles was developed way back in 1868 by House of Lords in Rylance versus Fletcher case. The principle says that a person who indulges into the non-natural use of land and who keeps hazardous substances on their land will be strictly liable if such substances escapes and from the premises and causes damage. So escaping of such hazardous substances is important, and by way of escaping, it must cause damages to the third party or to the any other party. It has four exceptions, namely, first, the plaintiff's own fault. If the plaintiff is at on fault, then obviously a strict liability principle will not apply. Then the act of God, then the act of third party. For the act of third party, the strict principle liability says, a strict liability principle says that the plaintiff will not be liable, or the owner of such hazardous substances will not be liable. And the fourth one is, if the hazardous activity was being carried out with the consent of the plaintiff. So the one who claims the damages because of the escape of such hazardous substances, and if that activity is being carried out with the consent of the plaintiff itself or himself, then the principle of a strict liability will not be attracted. What happened in 1987 when in MC Mehta versus Union of India and Charan Lal Sahu versus Union of India, the Supreme Court of India actually took away all these exceptions and developed the principle of absolute liability. As we all know that in 1984, the Bhopal gas leak case had happened, where the poisonous gas was released from the hazardous activities which was carried out in the Dow chemicals, by the Dow chemicals, and it was a foreign company. The lakhs of people have died because of the release of such hazardous substances from the industrial unit. And it was for the first time which was happening in the constitutional regime of 1950, though the minor incidents have taken prior to that also in India. But the loss of life and property on such a massive scale took place in 1984 because of the Bhopal gas leak, which we know Bhopal gas leak case. There were a lot of writ petitions, there were a lot of court proceedings where the government of India was not able to respond promptly and quickly. What to do in such a scenario, how we should make accountable a foreign company and the directors of such foreign company, what will be the compensation which the human rights, which particularly the victims will receive, how it will be calculated, how it ought to be calculated, who will pay, whether the government of India is absolute liability, is liable to pay, or the industrial unit is liable to pay. These were the unknown paths, unknown chartered unknown territory wherein the Supreme Court of India was for the first, or the legal system of India for the first time faced. We did not have any insurance act to that relating to the protection and prevention or the compensation of the loss of the lives and the properties in such a disaster incident. Because if we know the legal system and the legal development, if we trace back, then we have this Public Insurance Liability Act of 1991. Before that, we were not having even the Public Insurance Liability Act, because our legal system was not capable enough to envisage such a scenario which will cause such a loss of life and on major scale. Though the judgment which has been given in 1987, that is MC Mehta versus Union of India, where the Supreme Court developed the principle of absolute liability, Justice Bhagwati notes down that it is the absolute liability of the one who runs such chemical activity or the hazardous activities in their premises. There can't be any exception to the for the loss of life and the loss of property of the human beings. Because at that point of time, the public interest litigation in Indian constitutional scenario was being developed. And Justice Bhagwati, a champion of migrant workers, a champion of workers' rights, sorry, not only migrant workers, but the champion of champion of workers' rights, labor rights. He was very compassionate about the dignity, human dignity, right of right to life, which the Constitution, which the Supreme Court of India was evolving and interpreting in case-to-case basis. So Justice Bhagwati, while developing this principle of absolute liability, said that enterprises which engaged in such hazardous activities or inherently dangerous activity, then and possesses threat to the right to health and safety of the person concerned in the environment, in the surrounding areas, then such person owes an absolute liability which is non-delegatable. It means the liability cannot be contributory, liability cannot be delegated to the someone else. Such industrial units or the persons who are carrying out the hazardous activities are absolutely liable in such a scenario. It has recognized no exception. Just remember, when I will be discussing the various courts orders and the judicial orders relating to the Vizag gas leak case and its implications, that how it is important, the journey from the strict liability to the absolute liability. Now coming to the factual background of the Vizag gas leak case. On the intervening night of 6th and 7th May 2020 at 3 a.m. in the morning, in the industrial unit managed by the LG came, that is the LG, which we popularly known as Life is Good, or the tag with the brand which we know the tagline Life is Good. LG company was owning this LG Polymer India Private Limited, which was industrial unit incorporated in India, running at Visakhapatnam, suburban area of Visakhapatnam city. At 3 a.m. in the morning, with the ease of lockdown, when the world was facing and the India was facing a lockdown, complete lockdown of the industrial activities and the major industrial activities, and the major life was locked down due to the pandemic COVID-19, and with the relaxation of certain and the resumption of economic activity, as the industrial unit began functioning and started functioning, the gas leaked on the intervening night of 6th and 7th May 2020. The gas was named as styrene. What are its impact on the human health, which can be the important impact or the major impact on the human health, where it impacts on the respiratory system, it causes irritation in eyes, it impacts the central nervous system, kidney, liver, eyes, nasal parts, which means that it has the capacity to impact all the vital organs of the human body. Forget about the animals. Now, where is this gas, stearine gas, commonly found also? For your information, this stearine gas is also found while smoking cigarette in common, but very in minuscule proportion, and the immediate impact of on the human health is not noted. When we smoke cigarette, this stearine gas is also present, but in a very minuscule portion, and the impact is not noted down immediately. However, the experts warn that when the amount of gas and the concentration of gas increases in environment and raises to a maximum of 700 ppm, then it causes immediate impact on the human health, and it can be noted down. And certainly the sudden release of the gas at 3 a.m. was more than in 700 ppm concentration, because the immediate loss of life, because the people started falling unconscious, the loss of life of animals, the children's, it affected children's and women most, particularly the pregnant women in the locality, and the impact was such a measure that it impacted in a radius of 6.2 kilometers. The pungent smell of the gas can be felt even 7 kilometers beyond. So the industrial unit or the environment or the surroundings which was near this industrial unit, that is LG Polymer India Limited, the concentration was very high. Now coming to the legal framework, it is a gas which is listed in the rules, that is entry 583 of the Manufacture, Storage and Import of Hazardous Chemicals Rules 1989, as regulation framed by the central government under the Environment Protection Act. Now, the nature of gas is such that it mandates that whosoever is dealing in this gas, because of its inherent property, it mandates that there should be an off-site plan and on-site plan for the safety and rescue. It becomes important when we will discuss the rescue and the safety operations subsequent to the release of gas under the Disaster Management Act 2005 and its implication on the constitutional rights. Now, who are these companies? Who is running this company? As I have indicated earlier, it was a company run by the LG, wholly owned subsidiary of a Korean company, LG Chem. But this industry the industrial activity was prevailing in India or being carried out in India since 1968. LG came very later, that is in 1997, when it took over the Hindustan Polymers. Hindustan Polymers was founded in 1968, and it was dealing in the polystyrene and the production of various kinds of polymers. Since 1997, it remains a foreign company incorporated under the Indian Companies Act. So, and its directors most of the directors are from the Korea. Now coming to the constitutional perspectives, what are the set of rights which is attracted by release of such a gas? First, right to environment. We know how rich is our right to environment jurisprudence developed by the Supreme Court of India. Then the right to life as a facet of Article 21 itself. Then the right to health, again as a facet of Article 21. Then right of workers, then in that case, we will have this right to sustainable development as developed by the Supreme Court of India in case law of ND Jayal versus Union of India. I will be discussing all these case laws and the important case laws. I will be giving the important account of all these case laws on the constitutional rights, particularly that how the right to health and the Supreme Court in 2020 is going, or the any judicial courts or the any constitutional courts is going to interpret the incident or analyze the incident of Vizag gas leak case. Coming to the right to environment, as we all know that the Supreme Court has read right to environment as a part of Article 21, right to life in the state of Bihar versus Subhash Chandra case, wherein it says that the right to read with Article 48A and Article 51AG of the Constitution. Article 48A being the part of the directive principle of state policy, where the state shall endeavor to protect and improve the environment and to safeguard the forest and wildlife. At the same time, Article 51AG casts a duty on the citizens of India to protect and improve the natural environment. So with the release of this gas and the concentration particularly, and the impact which it had on the environment and the surrounding, that is to an extent of 7 kilometers, it has adversely affected the environment. The various principles which the Supreme Court or the constitutional courts in India has employed to determine the environmental liability are the two set of principles, that is the polluter pays principles and the precautionary principles. Polluter pays principles comes into the picture when the hazardous incident or the environmental damage occurs, or it has already occurred, so that the polluter is made liable to pay under the polluter pays principles. It was developed in the Kanpur Tannery case and the Madurai Tannery cases by the Supreme Court of India. That if you are an industrial unit and the polluting the environment and the particularly the river sources or the water sources, then you have to pay the as per the polluter pays principles. It is incorporated in the Environmental Protection Act, and it is one of the guiding principles under the NGT Act 2011 to determine the environmental liability of the polluting industrial units. Under the Environment Protection Act, the CPCB and State Pollution Control Board, SPCB, the two authorities which work simultaneously for the protection of environment and the regulates such industrial activities which has a tendency or which has a potential to cause impact on the environment or the threat to environment and life. These two authorities are the regulatory bodies considering where the industrial activity or such hazardous activities are being carried out. Coming to the right to environment again, another principle, that is precautionary principle. Precautionary principle comes into a picture before an hazardous activities has taken place. It says that precaution is better than precaution. The industrial unit has to take the safety precautions, safety measures as a precautionary principles. What are the such precautionary standards which an industrial unit or the hazardous unit has to take? These are being provided under the Factories Act, relevant Factories Act, relevant industrial, or it was a gas related works. So the gas rules or the handling of such hazardous gas rules, where rules provides for the safety standards and the safety measures which as a precaution these industrial units have to take and have to employ on site, not necessarily off site. So in absence of this compliance, and it is the duty of the State Pollution Control Board and the Central Pollution Control Board in whose jurisdiction such industrial unit operates and functions to ensure that the safety standards and the precautionary standards are being complied and are in place in the industrial units. Coming to the now right to health, it is very interesting development in last 30 years under the Indian constitutional jurisprudence, because we know that the health is being impacted by such hazardous activities and such industrial activities, and the direct bearing of such laws or the hazardous activities is the human health. Because we are an overpopulated country, we seldom have regards for the human lives, but the safety standards and the right concern for the right to health is being recognized and being developed as an integral part of labor rights and the safety standards. It is gaining momentum in India, and particularly we can see its impact and the clamor, the clarion call for such an protection and the abdication of duty by the Supreme Court in the case of particularly the migrant workers in the COVID-19 scenario. How the migrant workers and the labor rights are left on the roads, particularly to walk miles, thousands of kilometers, impacting their health. After all, these workers, these laborers, and these human force were contributing by their labor in the economic development and the economic capacity, increasing the economic capacity of the nation state, that is India. We say that we are an developing economy, and the economic, we are progressing and the prospering economically on what strength? Not alone the industrial units or the technological strength. Rather than these are the human lives, workers, laborers who are making them work, making them the economically prosper. Their contribution towards the economy and the economic activities. So the right to health becomes important from this perspective. And we know that in India, health system is a mixed kind of health system. We have this government, Prime Minister health policies, and the various kinds of health policies where of the central government and the state government. We have the municipal hospitals and the government hospitals where the public health system is being nurtured, being taken care of. But are they of adequate standards? Are they enough adequate enough to protect and preserve the human lives, to meet the economic capacity and particularly the emergent situations in such a situation, in such a scenario of hazardous activities or the emergency situation or the disaster situation? To what extent the private hospitals, from where the money and the cost of private hospitals will come in such a scenario if the laborers and the population is being admitted? Delhi presents a very good model of the public health system. And particularly the Supreme Court, I will be discussing the Supreme Court judgment of 2018, the Moolchand Kharatiram Hospital case, wherein the Supreme Court said that the government policy, particularly which mandates and implements the provision of Article 47, that is duty of the state to raise the level of nutrition and standard of living and to improve public health, and obliges and asks the private hospitals to contribute towards this betterment of the and the realization of public health, then the private hospitals are equally mandated to provide such system on the considerable rebate charges and the considerable affordable charges to the common man. The Moolchand Hospital in Delhi was allocated several hectares of land for running these hospitals. It was a private hospital, It challenged the Delhi government policy, and Justice Arun Mishra, in his judgment, particularly mandates that it does not impinge upon your right to carry trade and activities in the hospital business. Hospital business is not a pure trade like what we had the PA Inamdar case, where the education was not considered as a trade. Education was considered as a service to the nation. Similarly, Justice Misra, the hospital business and the public health business, they said that it is, Justice Misra said that it is not a purely trade under Article 19(1)(a), which any individual has right to carry out trade and profession in the legal manner. Rather, you have an obligation under Article 47, being even a private hospital, to improve and contribute towards right to health. So that's a very significant development in terms of the economic scenario which India is pursuing because of the globalization, privatization, and liberalization. And as far as the safety, health of the common man and the workers are concerned. Now, coming to the medical right to medical assistance, it has been recognized in this very judgment of the Mulchand Khairati Ram Hospital. Then Supreme Court in this hospital says, in this hospital judgments only, it says the poor cannot be deprived of treatment by the best physician due to their economic disability in case he requires it. So the ones a poor citizen or the economically less privileged citizen requires the services of best physician and the best medical services, then he or she can't be denied and deprived of it, even in the best hospital run by the private management. So this aspect, taking the public functions and making hospitals liable, is an important development in terms of rights jurisprudence in the recent years, which is very important in such a disaster and the hazardous activity scenario which has taken place in the Visakhapatnam. Because if the news reports are believed, more than 1,000 people have been admitted in the various hospitals in the Visakhapatnam cities. And if the news reports are also believed, then during the COVID-19 pandemic scenario, our health system has been exposed to the reality. Exposed to the reality to the sense when I say that in India, for a population of 130 crores, we do not have even a minimum of 1 million beds in the hospital. To meet the emergency situation, the railway coaches were being prepared as an isolation wards. So it's a very grim situation when it comes to the right to public health. And during the pandemic, COVID-19, if such a disaster occurs, what has happened in Visakhapatnam, though the scale is quite lesser in terms of and in comparison of Bhopal gas leak case. But imagine a similar situation like Bhopal gas leak case in 2020 during this pandemic. The human lives and dignity will be left at the mercy of the God. No constitution and no state, and particularly the Indian states, are in not a position to, so the position to meet the emergent situation. Now coming to the another set of right, that is comfort to the workers, particularly in terms of Article 42, provision for just and human conditions of work. And the next part of this article is maternity relief. So we will leave this maternity relief, but we will emphasize on the human condition of the work. What is this human condition of work? To what extent it can be interpreted? And it has been interpreted by the Supreme Court of India so far. Article 42 has been interpreted in one of the leading judgment, that is Consumer Education and Research Center versus Union of India 1995 judgment, wherein it says right to health. The Supreme Court recognizes right to health to a worker is an integral facet of meaningful right to life, to have not only the meaningful existence but also robust health and vigor, without which worker would live a life of misery. So right to health of the worker has been, as enshrined under Article 42, has been read as a part and parcel of right to life. If we remember this Moon versus Illinois, the US judgment, and particularly the Bombay pavement case, slum dwellers case, the human life and the right to life does not merely envisage a animal existence. It envisages a dignified, a certain minimum dignity is attached to the human life. So similarly, this in 1995 judgment, right to health of the worker has been read as a right to life while interpreting Article 42 of the Constitution. Now, another judgment, that is the Occupational Health and Safety Association versus Union of India, a 2014 decision by the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court says that the right to health, that is right to live in a clean, hygienic and safe environment, is a right flowing from Article 21. The importance lies on the three words: right to live in a clean, hygienic and safe environment. Certainly the Vizag gas leak case and the environment and the surroundings which has been polluted due to that hazardous activities or the leak of the gas has deprived the population living therein of the clean and hygienic and safe environment. Clean, hygienic and safe environment. It's a 2014 judgment. So we can see within 2 decades, right from 1995, while interpreting Supreme Court, the right to health of the worker, reading as an integral facet of the right to life. In 2014, within 20 years, the Supreme Court has further enhanced the rights by adding these terms of the workers' health and particularly the people who are living surrounding these industrial units. Though it is interpreted as a part 4, it comes as an interpretation of part 4 of the Constitution. But we also know the Minerva Wells Constitution Bench judgment, where the Supreme Court had said that the part 4 has to be read with part 3 as an integral part of interpretation of constitutional rights in India. So the emerging jurisprudence which is being developed and which takes us to the present scenario, that what if such rights are recognized or have been recognized by in the judicial decisions, then what is the relief to the individuals or to the population at large which has been affected by such a when there's such a Vizag gas leak case or scenario. The right to life and particularly Article 32 of the Constitution also recognizes compensatory jurisprudence, right to compensation. If we recollect the famous 1978 judgment of the Rudal Shah, wherein the Supreme Court for the first time under Article 32 of the Constitution read right to compensation as a part of fundamental right. That if your fundamental rights have been violated by the state authorities, you have a right to compensation and adequate compensation. And it granted, because in Rudal Shah case, it was a case of imprisonment beyond prescribed period of the punishment. Because of the poverty, because of the lack and lackadaisical approach of the jail authorities, the Rudal Shah was imprisoned beyond the prescribed imprisonment or the period. So the writ petition came as a public interest litigation, and the Supreme Court recognized right to compensation, and this right to compensation has been further enhanced and particularly engrafted and instilled in the Indian jurisprudence, particularly the constitutional rights jurisprudence, in the cases of Nilabati Bahera case and Chandrima Das case. Chandrima Das case is important because it was a case of the rape victim being awarded the compensation, and the rape occurred in Indian Railway on a running train. So the Supreme Court in this particular case said that the victim needs to be compensated because it is the right violation of right to life and her dignity, and that also in a public place, which is the security for which the security has to be provided by the state, that is Union of India. And the state has miserably failed in providing the life security to the life and liberty of the individual concerned. Now coming to the right to compensation, who determines this compensation and to what extent, which authorities, the practical aspects. Under the Public Insurance Act 1991, which actually incorporates the absolute liability principle as developed by in the MC Mehta case, this Public Insurance Liability Act mandates and entrusts the district magistrate reside particularly of that particular jurisdiction and the particular area where the such incident has taken place to determine the compensation. If and that also the important aspect is within 5 years of period of and the occurrence of such incident. So the time frame is within 5 years. So even if you have not approached for compensation immediately, but within 5 years, and the people particularly considering the poverty and the economic and the socio-economic development in India and particularly the rural India, this time frame is important. And once a claim has been made by the victim, it is not for the victim to prove that he or she has suffered loss because of this incident or a particular incident. Yes, a fair hearing and the principle of natural justice is being complied by the giving natural hearing, a right to hearing to the industrial unit and the polluting units, that whether such a compensation should be allowed or not, and what are the objections and what are not the objections. The right to hearing is being provided to the industrial units, but it is the onus of proof or the burden of proof is not on the victims and the one who seeks the compensation. So the unique feature of this Public Insurance Liability Act 1991, which incorporates the absolute liability principle, is also in favor of victim. So we are simultaneously analyzing, besides the constitutional framework, the statutory and the legal framework of the compensation. Now coming to the some kind of balancing activities or the balancing jurisprudence. Why these industrial units are running at all if they are so hazardous and so dangerous in their nature and activities? We know this styrene gas which has been released in the Vishakhapatnam is poisonous gas, is hazardous gas, but still the regulatory authorities and the because it brings in economic development and the economic activities, people gets livelihood, people gets employment. So the industrial units would certainly argue that we generate employment, we enhance the economic capacity of the nation state, we give them the livelihood. Such mistakes are bound to happen and inherently it is there. So if I I will like to recollect particularly the Roscoe-Ponds theory of balancing of interest, the various competing interests, individual interest, social interest, theory of social interest. This economic development has to go and the activity has to go simultaneously hand in hand, at the same time right to life and its various facets so far discussed, that is right to health, right to compensation, right to life and liberty, human dignity, and all this has to be protected. So the balancing aspect is also required. So Supreme Court, this jurisprudence is also well entrenched in the Indian judicial system particularly, and the Supreme Court recognizes this balancing aspect. And the classical case is ND Jayal versus Union of India. It relates to the development of Tehri Dam, and where the mass population was supposed to be dislocated and relocated in a new place. The people were losing their livelihoods and the economic activities because of the development of and the building of this dam. So they protested, but considering the impact on the economy and particularly the necessity of such an economic activity, considering balancing it with the environmental loss and the loss of livelihood and the prospects of generating further livelihood and through the economic activity. So all these competing in competing and the balancing components are being striked, and this is being done on the Roscoe Pont's theory of social interest, where the Supreme Court particularly expressly recognizes that the individual rights must be subsumed into the social rights and the rights of the society, rights of the society at large. Now, another aspect, right to sustainable development. Right to sustainable development is nothing but an extension of this balancing of various economic and environmental rights. It is environmental activities. It is all recognized in the international legal principles and the various conventions also dealing with the environment and the economic activities. That the right to sustainable development. But the Supreme Court has also read it as the right to sustainable development as a part of Article 21. And the latest development in right to sustainable development is whether an activity is anthropogenic in nature or it is such a inherent activities which causes only harms to the environment. Anthropogenic in the sense that it is man-made or it is naturally hazardous to the environment. So the right to sustainable development and particularly the how to determine the sustainable development activities. The Supreme Court has deployed this test of whether this activity is anthropogenic, which is causing the harm and the loss to the environment or not. If yes, then we will go ahead, we will stop, and if it is natural, which is bound to happen in the due course of the natural evolution, then we can't stop and we have to go for the sustainable development activity. Now coming to the another aspect of Vizag gas leak case, the practical and the constitutionally significant aspect, because of the very nature and the topic which we are discussing, that is environment. It falls under the concurrent list, though environment is not exactly the word, rather than various components of the environment are scattered in the list 1, list 2 and list 3 of the constitution, that is 7th schedule of the constitution. So who has the jurisdiction? State and center both have the parallel jurisdictions over such an activities, because it involves industrial activities, because it involves the gas related works, because it involves the labor laws or the labor related activities, because it involves the socio planning activities, because it involves the public health activities. If we care to look into the various entries of the 7th schedule of the constitution, we will find that the certain activities are listed in list 1. I will just give the brief entries. I will just read out the entries. The entries are like forest. It is entry 17A of the list 3, protection of wildlife and birds. Entry 17B of list 3, water. it is entry 17 of list 2. Similarly, industry, it is found in the both the list 1 and list 2, that is entry 7 and 52, and in list 2 entry 24. Similarly, public health, it is exclusively in the domain of list 2, that is a state list. Gas works, it is exclusively in the domain of a state list. Social planning activities, it is in the concurrent list 3. So we see a host of rules, regulations besides these constitutional provisions, a host of rules, regulations, laws, bylaws, acts by the center as well as state. So here comes the importance of collaborative or cooperative federalism. The principle of cooperative federalism and collaborative federalism has been explained very lucidly by the Supreme Court in one of the recent decisions by the Constitution Bench in a State of Delhi versus Union of India 2018 judgment. It says that the principle applies that the state and center must act in pursuit of development. They should not act in tension, rather than they should act in a collaborative and cooperative manner. It mandates, it takes out the various provisions of the judgment, beautifully takes out the various provisions of the Constitution on how the Constitution seeks a collaborative and cooperative exercise between the center and the state for the development and the progress of the nation and the governance particularly. So this judgment, if we analyze this activity, the entire activity, industrial activity and the gas leak case, because of the parallel jurisdiction of the center and the state, the two states, the two units and the governing unit, center and state, both have to act in tandem. And I will demonstrate, had they been acting in the tandem and the cooperation with each other and not at the loggerheads, the damage would have been very significantly less. Though the damage is the loss of 11 lives and the admission, around 1,000 people have been admitted in the hospital, it can't be said it is less. But obviously in India, this number is quite, numerically, it is quite less. Now, coming to the three decisions, the NGT National Green Tribunal decisions, NGT was primarily the first one to act. It took suo motu cognizance of the Vizag gas leak case, and on 8th May of 2020, it passed a comprehensive order. But there is flaw in that order of the NGT. It says that this incident attracts the strict liability principle and not the absolute liability principle which had been developed by the Supreme Court of India. What are the reasons to apply the strict liability principles in this particular case? The Vizag gas leak case is not given in the NGT order, and on that we are yet to hear from the court. But as per my opinion, the very application of a strict liability principle in this case is misplaced. It has to be absolute liability principle, because that is the constitutionally recognized principle in cases of determining the environmental liability. And the Supreme Court in time and again, and the various high courts also, like Madhya Pradesh High Court has this applied this principle in determining the loss because of the electricity, and said that the escape of electricity is a hazardous activities, and because of the loss of the life, particularly because of the loss of the life due to the negligence in handling the electricity, the state authorities are strictly liable, though the state authorities are performing the sovereign functions. Now, the NGT order says that the deposit 50 crores rupees that is very well recognized as a precautionary measure, and as a polluter pays principles, applying the polluter pays principles, considering the net worth of the company, deposit 50 crores with the district magistrate for the loss as a prerequisite for the compensation for the loss of life and the properties in the surroundings and the environment. But NGT order does not even discusses whether the compliance of precautionary principle was there or not. The precautionary steps and the safety standards and the safety measures which under the law this industrial unit was supposed to have in the place in the industrial unit itself, whether it was there or not. It has come in the news report, and particularly the BBC has reported that this industrial unit was not even having the environmental clearance by the State Pollution Control Board to run these activities. Again, because the industrial unit was resuming its economic activity after a lockdown, whether the necessary permission under the lockdown guidelines or the lockdown regulations were also obtained or not by the competent authorities. I think that is the district magistrate of the Visakhapatnam or not. That is also a question of fact. But as far as the NGT order is concerned, it is a very welcome step, and particularly the only concern is the non-application of the absolute liability principle by it. Subsequently, on 22nd May 2020, the High Court of Andhra Pradesh has taken another suo motu cognizance of this incident, though it is late, but it has taken suo motu and coupled with the public interest litigation on the Vizag gas leak case. The High Court, without going into the merit, regulates the very entry and the direction which it had passed. It regulates the entry and the who visits that industrial units, because it has taken note that the NGT has formed a committee of the several experts to determine the fact finding. So the High Court says that who enters into the premises and who carried out what activities has to be reported to the High Court back. Its directions are as simple as this. Very interesting development, because after all this, the industrial unit, that is LG Polymers India Private Limited, also approached Supreme Court by way of SLP against NGT order. And the only good thing which Supreme Court of India did during this pandemic is not to entertain the SLP of the LG Polymers, because it has so far the Supreme Court of India is facing the criticism of ignoring individuals' rights of the various sections of the society, particularly the migrant workers, public health rights, securities, right to life, livelihood, loss of economic activities. Supreme Court is not interfering in any of these rights related petitions. But I must say that the Supreme Court only did a good thing, that not to entertaining and the passing an stay order against the NGT directions. So the three orders which I have discussed with regard to the Vizag gas leak case, the subsequent proceedings will determine the ultimate phase of the case and the particular rights and of the citizens and the liability of the industry. But very interesting aspect, which I will take only 1 minute or 2 minutes to conclude with, the multiplicity of the committees which the Vizag gas leak case has attracted. One of the why the LG Polymers India Limited approached Supreme Court in SLP against NGT order, one of their ground was that there have been as many as eight different committees constituted to inquire and investigate into the Vizag gas leak case and to determine the fact. As far as I know, 5 committees have been constituted, one by the NHRC, one by the NGT order, one by the High Court committee order, another by Central Pollution Control Board, and another by District Magistrate Fact Finding Committee under the Disaster Management Act. District Magistrate has constituted this Fact Finding Committee under the Disaster Management Act 2005. So the multiplicity of committees on the very same incident, and each committees are comprising of 4 to 5, minimum of 4 and 5 members, different experts from the different fields, different universities, different research organizations. I just fear that the multiplicity of the minds investigating a particular incident and not seeking a kind of cooperation, or the not working in tandem by the different authorities which have the jurisdiction. Central Pollution Control Board also has the jurisdiction because it was a major industrial mishap. State Pollution Control Board has because of the territorial jurisdiction. District Magistrate also has the jurisdiction because it happened in the city of Visakhapatnam or district of Visakhapatnam. Then NGT has the universal jurisdiction because it has the jurisdiction over all over India. High Court has the territorial jurisdiction and the protection of fundamental rights jurisdiction. So, and the NHRC has the human rights jurisdiction to constitute a fact-finding and investigating committee. So the multiplicity of committees and which committee's report will be accepted, which committees, whether all the committee report recommendations will be uniform or not. So here the legal experts and the legal minds representing various sections and the stakeholders will start manipulating. But ultimately, I just hope that the victims do not further suffer. The rights and particularly the rights which are well recognized, the constitutional rights which are well recognized under the Constitution of India to the common man, to the common citizen, to the population, are well served by the all these authorities and the judicial bodies. This again coming to the another practical aspect under the Disaster Management Act. I don't know how many of you have been to Visakhapatnam, but Visakhapatnam is a very vibrant city and really a cosmopolitan city which houses so many industrial units, and the major Maharatnas and Navratnas are there. So all these industrial units have the safety team and the disaster management teams at their, and they are on duty 24/7. So under the Disaster Management Act, there is a provision that if a mishap is happening or the hazardous activities or the leakage has happened or the disaster has happened in any of the industrial unit, then all other industrial unit have to collaborate and send their rescue team and the safety standard team to mitigate the circumstances, to bring control to that the minimum loss to the life and property is caused. Unfortunately, this incident happened at 3 a.m. in the morning, and under the Disaster Management Act, the order to cooperate and collaborate by the different safety standard teams and the safety precautionary teams of the different industrial houses was supposed to be released from the district magistrate, which it never got released promptly. Had it been released at 3 a.m., so say that 3 a.m. incident happened, by 3:30 the district magistrate has ordered all the major industrial units that send your rescue team or send your safety standard team to the site, because it is just within the 14 and 15 kilometers of the periphery of the city of Visakhapatnam, main city of Visakhapatnam. Then I think the collaborative and the cooperation among the industrial houses and the prompt decision making by the competent authority, that is in the present case district magistrate under the Disaster Management Act, would have further lesser lessen the loss of life and property. With this, I would like now to invite questions and over to Zia.
Yes, it was so enlightening session, sir. We will ask you so many questions on this, but first of all, let us ask anybody who's having any question, please raise your hand. Till then, I'm asking a question of Advocate Nimish ji has asked a question, sir. The question is that this type of incident, what you call such type of incident, are they man-made or a natural act? Basically, they're asking that whether this type of incident in which such a death is happening, will you call such incident of industries are man-made or a natural disasters?
It is a purely man-made incident which has not taken its natural course, or the because the industrial unit which was working since 1968, that is Hindu. That's why I gave the very brief background of the industrial unit also, that since when it is working, it is dealing in this styrene gas and the polymers, particularly right from 1968. So the history says, particularly the history of its working of last 50 years, no, 70 to, yeah, 50 years particularly, indicates that this gas can be controlled and managed in a, without releasing it into the environment, and without releasing. So there is a negligence on some part, either because of the lockdown or the in haste to resume the economic activities. There is some kind of negligence at some point of time, at some in the functioning of the industrial unit. So it is purely a man-made mishap which has happened in the Vishakhapatnam.
Any person may ask the question. Please raise your hand. Any person interested to ask the question may raise your hand. I will get you unmute and you can directly ask the question from sir. Till then, we can tell you that how important this issue is. Sir was discussing about committee only. Just and while you are discussing, Supreme Court has comment upon the committees, and also it has allowed the application of LG polymers, sir, and by allowing them 30 people access into the uh, industry. The LG polymer has applied for the access into the, because it has been seized. The Supreme Court has allowed them the access of 30 people. The 30 people may get the access and may do inquiry on the behalf of LG polymers, because they want to take the defense. So what was sir was talking, that has already been half of that has been dealt by Supreme Court, because Supreme Court is interested to make a uniform committee now. So it will be interested to form uniform committee. What sir was discussing just right now, it has been done, and that is why we are discussing on this issue. It's such an important issue. Question has been asked by Merdul sir. Question is, what are the possible grounds that the prosecution may raise to establish mens rea for criminal liability while the incident prima facie seems to be accident?
Prima facie to be?
Seems to be accident.
See, the criminal liability, because of the loss of life, particularly the criminal liability is also, but I think again I will say that the criminal liability, fixing the criminal liability of such mishap or the accident because of the industrial activities, it will be acting as a deterrent to the future prospects of the attracting foreign direct investment and the again the economic well-being of the particularly country. But again the balancing aspect, here comes the balancing aspect, how the right loss of life and property will be balanced with the economic activities. The criminal prosecution of the directors and the persons who are responsible, uh, because prima facie we can ascertain that the even the environmental clearance was not obtained by the industrial unit in this case. So there is a, on that aspect, that there is a criminal liability, because that you know that the law of India mandates that the without this clearance, environmental clearance, you cannot run such hazardous activities or the proper safety, because the clearance involves this inspection of the site, clearance involves the reaching of a conclusion by the expert that this industrial unit is safe for running the hazardous activities or the carrying out the activities, economic activities. So the criminal liability can be fixed from these perspectives, that it has not obtained the due environmental clearance, that has caused loss of the life, because it a lot will depend upon the facts that what has triggered this leak of gas. If because of the lapse in the safety standard and the technical standard, which it was supposed to have a minimum threshold, and the certificate was not obtained by the competent authority, the Central Pollution Control Board or the State Pollution Control Board, and then the activity, the gas leak has happened, then the criminal liability of such person is criminal. But the again, LG Polymer has said that it was carrying out these activities or running the industrial unit with the consent of competent authorities. So with the consent of competent authorities, it means there was a tacit agreement. So who is responsible in the state department also, or the competent authorities also, for such negligence? Because of the negligence, always there is a scenario of fastening the criminal liability on the individuals. Like, but and the another point which I missed, the High Court in its order has directed to surrender the passports of all the directors, and the directors will not leave the country without the leave of the court, particularly the Andhra Pradesh High Court. So in that case scenario, even if the criminal liability or the negligence mens rea is established, a lot will depend upon the committee's fact finding that what has really triggered the leak of the gas.
So another question is from Deepti. She is asking whether the compensation in such cases will amounts to a fair judgment, or we can do something else also. So giving a compensation alone, will it serve the justice or not in such cases?
That's a very subjective question, and one has to form the opinion, because in the recent times, particularly the judicial approach is towards the compensation. Even in the, we say that the certain crimes are committed against the society, and the certain there is no compensation. There is no compensation which can actually compensate the loss of life and the loss of one loss of individuals or the loss of family members, and particularly who has lost it. But obviously in such a scenario, the economic compensation, particularly the compensatory jurisprudence which has been evolved, and the adequate compensation can take care of the minimum dignity of the individuals. So it may not be justice in the ultimate sense, but yes, uh, the compensation can help you in realizing the other rights and the one who are there to live the life with the dignity, because the loss has ultimately loss has happened, the human lives has been lost. Similarly, that's why I discussed in the case of Chandrima Das versus Union of India, where the rape victim was being compensated. Her the loss of dignity and the particularly the loss right to life and the particularly the dignity aspect cannot be quantified. But again, the courts in such a scenario are resorting to the economic compensation.
Yes. Another question is, it's a common question asked by Guru Bhatt, Dr. Nimesh. What they are asking is that what precautions does the state should take so that such activities or such incidents which are happening continuously from the after even Bhopal tragedy and prior to that, after independence, we have seen that so many industrial incidents has taken place. What is the credentials or the steps that should be taken by the state, because mere paying the compensation will not be justifiable. So how this labor class rights it to be protected? As view says that protection is better than cure. What are the protection gears that has to be followed by the state so that we can lower down the incidents which are happening right now?
uh, there it involves multi-pronged approach. The first one, I will deal with the regulatory level. At regulatory level, I have discussed, see how many authorities have the jurisdiction over this incident particularly. So I will say that let there be two authorities, one at the state and one at central level. No human rights, NHRC and all these committees should interfere. Second, at the regulatory level, and there should be a strict compliance of the regulations, because if we see, we have the legal system or the legal framework in the place: Disaster Management Act, robust labor laws, standard safety precautions measures, how to handle with such hazardous gas and the particularly hazardous activities. We have separate rules for the every hazardous activities and the hazardous waste which are being generated under the Environmental Protection Act. So a strict implementation of those standards, compliance, and the timely check by the competent authorities. Like in this case, a state pollution control board should normally visit an industrial house in a month. In once in a month, it should visit and it should carry out the inspection. A state pollution control. If you do not have the manpower to carry out the with experts and or the experts to carry out the visit and inspect such industrial houses, then the state is completely liable. It's a state law, a state loss. The state is at fault, because once you have the regulation, once you have the industrial unit, once you require these economic activities to run, and you know that this is inherently dangerous, then you have to ensure either it's a safety standard, then it should come from the one who is running the industrial houses. We know that the industrial houses will never come of it their own voluntarily and report. So you have to check, go and check. So you have to recruit, employ a number of citizens, a number of experts, a number of employee in the state pollution control board who can visit regularly and check and compliance. The integral, the awareness of these enforcement agencies and the particularly individuals is also, because they should understand what they are inspecting, what is implications. The implication is any negligence in inspection or the safety standard or any lackadaisical approach in compliance and regulatory framework particularly will lead to the loss of life. So they should have a human approach and understanding towards the life, the importance of human life. Then only, otherwise, if we have an approach where the mindset particularly that fine, who will be the victim? It will be the migrant workers, or it will be the ultimately the poor people who are the workers and laborers who do not have the economic capacity to raise or their voices, or that's why they are working as a laborer or the daily wages laborer. Then, and their life does not matter to us, then it is not I think you frame n number of guidelines, n number of regulations, it can't work. It will work only when the implementation and the enforcement agencies have the inherent value and recognizes in their approach the inherent value for the human life.
Thank you, sir. It was a great session. It was so enlightening session. So I'm removing you from the event. Thank you very much, sir. We will sure that you will again will try to come and again enlighten us.
Thank you all.
Thank you, sir. Hopefully, you all people enjoy the event. It was a great event and a well discussed topic. I will try to bring up more recent topics in June with you. All will be contemporary issues. We will try to discuss all the contemporary issues that we can do. Your certificate will be reaching by the evening or the next morning tomorrow, and along with that, you will be sending we will be sending a feedback form also. which means that you can recommend us the changes which is you required. Firstly, secondly, any topic which you think is important and we're not able to cover it, so you can advise us for the same, so that we can cover more and more and maximum topics that we can. Thank you very much, and hopefully you'd understand that it is not regarding thoughts which we are discussing. We normally discuss. So you can can open your cameras. We can. We will do the criminal administration justice topic also soon, Nimesh ji. And this topic which we have discussed today was very, very, very important because it is so much people understand it, think it as